Okay, after completing the shading in the last video on these high elf spearmen, we're just now starting to reapply base colours where we need them as the kind of first step in doing the layering and highlighting. So I'm using a brush with a bit of water in the actual bristles just to keep the paint thinned as I work with it. And this stage is necessary. You know, we only put down one red layer in the base coat stage, so this just strengthens that layer while leaving the dark in the shaded areas. So we'll just be quite neat with this. We're looking to leave little areas where it is shaded, and you can see now how much better defined the white triangles are on the chest plate. This is all about building up the brightness and the strength of the colour, which gives it that mid-90s look, where the colours, especially reds and things, were really highly saturated. You can only really do that by using multiple layers. One thing you'll notice when I'm painting is that I turn the miniature around in any different angle that I need to best align the brush with the direction I want to paint in. So I never use a holder for the miniatures because I just think they would be too restrictive. I find it much easier to paint if everything is in a favourable direction. Just make sure you keep cleaning the brush. You've just got to balance how thin the paint is, because you don't want it flowing where you don't want it to go, especially on these thinner sections. Now for the spear shaft, which you can maybe tell the paint's a bit patchy because it only had that one layer of red. So this is when we build up that colour properly now, while maintaining that little black outline that we achieved in the previous video. A little bit of red to build up near the grip. Okay, there we go. So that's the red done. Okay, now just reapplying the XV88 to the boots and gloves. Still not broke out the wet palette yet. I'm just using a kind of slightly damp brush, and then a bit of paint on the mat here, just to help do it kind of quickly. It does look quite bright when you paint it on like this, but it dries away a bit darker. And again, the technique here, I'm just trying to leave the darker areas and reapply to that kind of mid-tone zones, which just gives you a better position to highlight with later on. You also want to start picking out the fingers on the gloves. If you can, just a little line of paint. And yeah, the left hand glove will be largely covered with a shield eventually. Some of these areas don't have too much in the way of detail, so you can start just with the brush stroke itself. Start indicating kind of folds in the cloth. And just make sure to keep wetting the brush as you go. We're not looking to put the paint on very thick at all. can, once you've been round everything once, just go back over it again, just briefly. You do that here and there, just to, with a, thin paint, but it just helps start to establish a bit of blending. We're not going to go overboard in these rank and file miniatures. Just kind of want a decent standard, and that'll do. Okay, I've set up the wet palette now, just so from here on in we can hopefully control the paint a bit better, certainly for these thinner highlight layers. So I've got some Ulthman white, just a case of touching in the white where some of that red shade went over the edge, just to sharpen it up. And then on the white dots around the waist, where we can see them a bit easier now. Just a little circular motion. And then, if you like, on the clothing, just use a little bit of this Ulthman white to add a little bit of a highlight here and there, just on the edges of the folds, and also just correcting any areas where some of the other colours have gone onto the white, just on the edge of the sleeve. And that does it for the white. As I say, just keep washing out the brush to make sure that the paint is nice and thin and comes off the brush easy. And then just a bit of Deathclaw brown on the backpack. Probably need a couple of passes with this. Okay, time for the Evil Sun's Scarlet, to go over all the red areas, and this will likely need 2 passes because we're trying to build up that brightness in the red. And now we're looking to leave some of the previous shade. This is when the colours start to pop. Especially this red. And it's just a case of using a finer brush and taking your time. Try and keep it neat. And just making sure not to go over everything. You want to leave some of that darker red, just to help indicate some sort of blending from dark to light. That effect will become more pronounced with a second pass. It's such a signature look for these older miniatures, especially if you're trying to paint them in the older style. You do need to make sure you get the brightness of the colours. Try and build up that saturation for some of these finer lines, as long as you've got a decent tip on the brush and both your arms are down on the desk. You should be able to pick out the shape. And up on the helmet there, you want to leave some of that darker red around the gem. There's not much room to work with. And then onto the spear shaft again here. And then just applying a second pass over the Evil Sun's Scarlet, just to build it up. And this is much quicker this time. It does make a difference. Just making sure to leave plenty of the original red, the darker shade, still showing. And as you work down the spear, just thin the paint a bit more. Just to hint at a bit of a blend from a brighter red at the top. And that's it for that stage. Okay, back to the boots and the gloves now. And I'm using a 50-50 mix of XV88 and Balor Brown. Just mixed on the wet palette, so it's pretty thin. And as you paint it on, it does look quite bright. But that will darken down as it dries. And will just act as a bit of an intermediate layer. You're just looking for the main raised areas on the boots and gloves. Trying not to paint over the whole lot, trying to leave some of the shading that's already there. I think if you jump straight to Balor Brown, it's too strong, too light, so better just to use something in between first. Mainly focusing on the raised areas. And you can be quite heavy with this. As I say, it does dry darker. There we go. So 4 more to do. Okay, now highlighting the red again with Wild Rider red. Idea here being just to catch some edges and try and indicate those brighter highlights. We'll do it in a few passes. In order to build up the colour. Can't really do it in one pass. You've just got to pick and choose where you want the highlights to be. And then for the star shape on the helmet, try and just do a couple of strokes each side. And on the spear, just do the very top, like that, so that's one pass. And then we go back and just build it up again as a second pass. And by doing that, you start to notice it more and more. Okay, so that's a few passes now with the Wild Rider red. So I'll carry on and get these all done. Just a final highlight now on the boots and the gloves using Balor Brown. Just building on top of what we've already got. Don't need to put too much into this. Just hitting the high points, and that does dry a bit closer to the layer below. This is a chance just to pick out the fingers and knuckles on the gloves. And once you've done one pass, just quickly go back over. And that'll do it for the leather. So that's the layering and highlighting done, certainly for the main miniature. The only thing I did add was a mix of Wild Rider Red and Fire Dragon Bright mixed together, just to add a final highlight on the tips of the kind of star pattern on the helmet, and a few other dots here and there, just to kind of give it that fiery orange effect. All that remains now would be to do a little bit of work on the faces, maybe do some highlights on the hair, do the gems, a bit of work to do in those, and then maybe a final bit of highlighting on the metal. But we'll do that in the next video. So thanks for watching.